Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, text number 9. Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gaja Yuta Paya Gaja Yuta Paya Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gaja Yuta Paya Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Tejak Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gajayuta Paya Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gajayuta Paya Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gajayuta Paya Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Bhaktya Tutosha Bhagavan Gajayuta Paya Manye Dhanabhijana Rupa Tapa Shutaujas Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanaya Hi Bhavanti Parasya Pungso Bhaktya-tutosha Bhagavan Gajayutapaya. Vaishnavis. Manye Danapi Janadrupa Tapah Sutaujas. Teja Prabhava Balapaura Shabhuti Yoga. Naradanaya hi bhavanti parasya pumso. Bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. Manye dana bijana rupa tapah sutaujas. Bhava balapu puri yogaha. Naradanaya hi bhavanti parasya pumso. Bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. Manye, I consider. Dhana, riches. Habijana, aristocratic family. Rupa, personal beauty. Tapaha, austerity. Shruta, knowledge from studying the Vedas. Ojaha, sensory prowess. Tejaha, bodily effulgence. Prabhava, influence. Bala, bodily strength. Paurusha, diligence. Buddhi, intelligence. Yogaha, mystic power. Na, not. Aradhanaya, for satisfying. He, indeed. Bhavanti, are. Parasya, of the transcendent. Pumsaha, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhaktya, simply by devotional service. Tutosha, was satisfied. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gajayutapaya, unto the King of Elephants. Gajendra. Translation. Prahlada Maharaj continued, one may possess wealth, an aristocratic family, beauty, austerity, education, sensory expertise, luster, influence, physical strength, diligence, intelligence, and mystic yogic power. But I think that even by all these qualifications, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one can satisfy the Lord simply by devotional service. Gajendra did this, and thus the Lord was satisfied with him. Would you like to repeat?
Yes.
Prahlada Maharaj continued. One may possess wealth, an aristocratic family, beauty, austerity, education, sensory expertise, luster, influence, physical strength, diligence, intelligence, and mystic yogic power. But I think that even by all these qualifications, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one can satisfy the Lord simply by devotional service. Gajendra did this, and thus the Lord was satisfied with him. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. No kind of material qualification is the means for satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Only by devotional service can the Lord be known. Bhaktyamam abhijanati. Unless the Lord is pleased by the service of a devotee, the Lord does not reveal himself. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrataha. This is the verdict of all Shastras. Neither by speculation nor by material qualifications can one understand or approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vita Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sapajutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakandikanscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namine Sri Varshabhana Videvi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhuryo Jvala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuga Vidridhapa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gora Kishodaya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sakchit Ananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupa Nuga Parayate Gaura Virbhava Bhomestvam Nirdesa Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhoma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Krupa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Damaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Surato Pangor Mama Manda Materagati Matsarva Swapadambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadha Srimad Ratnangara Singhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Preshtalibhi Sevyamano Smarami Sriman Rasarasarambi Vamshi Vatatatatastitaha Karshan Venu Swaner Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Vrindayai Tulsi Devyai Priyayai Keshavasya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satyavatyai Namo Namaha Shri Nishinga Jai Nishinga Jai Jai Narasingha Prahlada Desha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Bringa Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata Abhyutanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Srijamyaham Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskritam Dharma Samstapanartaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mami Vaishyasi Yukvaivam Matmanam Aparayanaha Sarvadharman Vadityaja Mamekam Shananam Braja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishami Masushaha Shushusho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanan Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Prityantaksto Hyapadrani Vidhunoti Suhritsatam Nashta Praeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tada Rajastamo Bhava Kamaloba Dayashchaye Cheta Ter Anabhidham Stitam Satve Prasidati Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Muktasangasya Jayate Vidyate Hridaya Grantish Chidyante Sarva Samshayaha Shiyante Chasya Karmani Drishta Evatmanishvare Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Manye Dana Bijana Rupa Tapasu Taujas Teja Prabhava Bala Paurusha Buddhi Yoga Naradanai Bhavanti Parasya Pumso Bhaktyatu Tosha Bhagavan Gajayutapayaha. This is a continuation of the prayers of Prahlada Maharaj as we're approaching the appearance day of Lord Nrsingadev, who appeared specifically to protect Prahlada Maharaj and to reciprocate with his absolutely pure devotion. Prahlada Maharaj is the object of discussion and for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who used to hear about Prahlad over and over again. The gopis also liked to hear the pastimes of Prahlad and Dhruva Maharaj. In fact, sometimes they would cry when they would hear about these children who were so devoted to the Lord, who went through so many austerities. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also encouraged his students to hear the pastimes of Prahlad and Dhruva Maharaj. It was their foundational for devotional service. That is, Prahlad's devotion is an emblem of unmotivated, uninterrupted service. It's not interrupted even in the most severe circumstances. When he was tested, his father tried to kill him just for his being a devotee. And even when the Lord offered him benedictions, Prahlada said, "No, thank you. I'm not a vanik. I'm not a merchant. I'm not asking for anything. I'm serving you because I'm your servant. That's all." And these famous prayers Prabhupada was very much fond of and commented on many times. This particular prayer is very practical. Manye dana bidana rupa tapasu taujas. So first, Prahlada Maharaj is naming in his prayer many different kinds of opulences that people are after. So he says, Manye, I think, Manye dhana bijana rupa tapasu taujas. So dhana, people are definitely after dhana. And in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Karabhajana Muni mentions how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had forsaken even the goddess of fortune to take sannyas and to run after the conditioned souls to give them Krishna consciousness. Everyone's after the goddess of fortune, hoping that she'll stay in their home. They do everything they can to keep her. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees are not interested. The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan are described, Kyaktva Turnamashesha Mandalapati Shrenim Sada Tuchavat Bhutvadina Ganeshako Karunaya Kaupina Kantashito Gopi Bhava Rasamritabdi Lahari Galolas Magno Mahur Vande Rupa Sanatano Raguyago Shijiva Gopalago. Srinivasacharya describes how the 6 Goswamis, who are followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, were at the pinnacle of wealthy society. Chakvaturna Mashesha Mandalapati. So they were at the top of their class in everything, in wealth, in learning. But Tyaktva, they gave it up. Tyakvaturna Mashesha Mandalapati Shrenim Sada Tuchavat. Everyone say Tuchavat. But you have to say it with a little bit of disgust. Tuchavat. Tuchavat means that one is completely casts off any association. There's a kind of a disgust. Tuchavat. It becomes distasteful. They found all these things, all these riches, all the learning distasteful. Tuchavat. They just gave it up. And they entered deeply into the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and hearing the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Abhijana, aristocratic family, Rupa, personal beauty. How much do people spend on beautifying themselves in this world? But the Goswamis, they gave up all their beautiful clothes and they just wore simple cloth. Whatever they could find, they just wore that. No consideration whatsoever. And tapa, austerity. People have become very attached to their austerities and their ability to perform austerities, but devotees aren't interested in these either. Ashruta, knowledge from studying the Vedas. Oja, sensory prowess. Teja, bodily effulgence. Prabhava, influence. Bala, bodily strength. Parusha, diligence. Buddhi, intelligence. Yoga, mystic power. So then he lists all these opulences that everyone's looking for, and then he says Naradanaya. That's Aradhanaya. So this is where the word Radharani comes from. Aradhanaya. It means none of these things are satisfying to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's not interested in them. Naradanaya, he bhavanti parasipungso. So one can't attract the Supreme Personality of Godhead even if that person has all of these qualities. But then Prahlada Maharaj says, Bhaktya tutosha bhagavan Gajayutapaya. Gajayutapaya means the king of the elephants, Gajendra. Prahlad remembered this story of Gajendra, which is millions of years old, and it's about how King Indradyumna in a previous life had offended a sage, and the sage cursed him because the sage thought he had acted stupidly. So he said, "So you're so stupid, you become an elephant in your next life." And then the next life, King Indradyumna, by this curse, became an elephant. But he was born in a heavenly planet. And in that heavenly planet, he had everything. He had a beautiful family. He had a nice residence. And one day he was walking with his family, enjoying their company, just near the Chitrakoot mountain. And there was a beautiful lake that was strewn with the pollen of different lotuses, heavenly aroma everywhere. And he entered deep into the water, as elephants like to do, and then with some strain he began to bathe his family members by spraying them with water. But he was enjoying. And then suddenly a crocodile grabbed his leg, and Gajendra began to fight the crocodile. And normally the elephant is stronger than the crocodile, but not in the water. In the water, crocodile is stronger. So Gajendra fought for 100 celestial years. Sometimes he was able to pull the crocodile near the shore, but then the crocodile pulled him back in. And there came a point where he realized, I can't win. And every one of us will come to that point at some time, no matter what we've acquired in this life, no matter what our bodily strength, we'll realize, now I'm going down. That point will come. And Gajendra, when he reached that point, called out to the Lord. And he didn't know he was calling out to the Lord. He just remembered prayers that he had recited faithfully in his last life. But they suddenly came to him in this time of great distress. And he began singing out. He pulled a lotus flower from the pond and he offered it. And the demigods heard these prayers and they said, these are not for us. These are for the Supreme. Narayan heard them and said, yes, that's my devotee. Because he was offering, even in an indescript way, he didn't know exactly what it was, but he had some feeling, some bhakti. Bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. A feeling was there, and he was offering it to the Supreme Lord, even without knowing exactly who he was. Every living entity has this feeling. Nitya siddha Krishna prema sadhya kabunoi shravanadi shuja chite karu udoi. This is the nature of every living entity, to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when in contact with the material nature, that love becomes distorted and misdirected to all kinds of other entities. And we become disappointed over and over again. In fact, Bhagavatam says, in this universe there's an ocean of tears. Those tears come from the crying of the living entities in this world, being disappointed with the severing of so many relationships, one after the other. We want so much to have that relationship. You see, in the presidential race in America, I always notice that people really want to worship somebody. They really want to look up to somebody. They really try to find good qualities and put someone up on a stand and say, that's our man. You know, we love him. And there's this natural propensity within the soul to find their ideal person and then worship that person. And so Gajendra, in this time of distress, called out, and the Lord heard him, and he came down and he saved Gajendra. He liberated him. He took his chakra and he chopped off the head of the crocodile. Of course, the crocodile was liberated also. And then Gajendra was liberated, Gajendra Mokshana. And he has prayers that he sang, that those prayers are famous in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course Prabhupada comments that the crocodile also got liberation because he spent so much time at the feet of Gajendra. This is also an important lesson, that Prabhupada would say something like that. The importance of bhakti, which is what we're talking about in this verse, that by the mercy of a devotee, I mean, even if you bite a devotee, I guess. Just bite onto the lotus feet of a devotee. Somehow get your teeth or your nails or somehow hold on. It's not what you know, it's who you know. That you can attract the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and become liberated. And Gajendra was liberated by the mercy of the Lord. Prahlada Maharaja is remembering that it's this pure substance, bhakti, that counts. Nothing else. You can winnow out all the other qualities. In fact, there are qualities mentioned of the pure devotee, but the one that's essential is that one has bhakti. And devotees may have other types of qualities. But if someone's a beginning devotee and doesn't have all these other embellishments, but does have one quality, which is that they're determined to worship the Supreme Lord, they have a feeling of devotion towards the Lord, then they're considered to be a devotee. But if someone doesn't have that, and they have all kinds of other qualities, that person's not considered to be a devotee. So the bhakti is the most important of all the aspects. And we can see practically that even if one is fighting a losing proposition, if one has some bhakti, then one still wins. The story of Jatayu, who is an old bird. He was a vulture, in fact. Of all the birds, the vulture is considered the most deplorable, revolting, whatever word you want to use, but no one really likes vultures hanging around. They're not even considered to be auspicious. But Jatayu was a great devotee of Lord Ram. And just after Ravan had stolen away Sita by his tricks, he had sent Maricha to take the form of a beautiful deer and to attract the mind of Sita. And she asked Ram, please run after that deer, get it for me, we can bring it back to Ayodhya, it'll be so nice, I'll keep it as a pet. And Lakshman was dubious about the whole thing. He said, that looks like Maricha. He's playing some trick. That can't be a real deer. And Ram said, so if it is, I'll kill him. And if not, then I'll bring back the deer. But Maricha was very clever, and he kept going further and further into the forest, drawing Ram away. And then, of course, Sita, after hearing the voice of Ram in the forest, which was a deception created by Maricha, Ram finally decided this is the demon Maricha, not a beautiful deer. And he killed the deer, and just as he was dying, Maricha called out, "O Lakshman, O Sita," just exactly in the voice of Lord Ramachandra. And when Sita heard that, she said, "Lakshman, go and save your brother." And he said, "That's not Ram. He wouldn't call out like that. That's the mystic Maricha calling out in that same voice, just trying to draw me away so that someone can come and steal you." And then she began to berate Lakshman, saying, "You've been planning this the whole time. You just wanted to have me alone. And now that your brother is in the forest in distress, you're going to leave him there." Lakshman was so distraught at hearing that, he finally ran off to meet up with Ram. And in the meantime, of course, Ravan came as a sannyasi, and he came in and abducted Sita, and he was flying off with her in his flying chariot. And Jatayu, noticing what had happened, challenged Ravana to a fight. And at that time, there's no chance that Jatayu would win. He was old, he was invalid, but he decided, I'll fight to the death. And he did. He put up such a fight that he smashed the chariot, and he gave Ravana a good lashing. And the fight went on, but soon Jatayu became tired, and Ravana cut off his wings and his feet, and then he was finished. He fell to ground in a heap, a bloody heap. And when Ram and Lakshman came back to find that Sita was gone, and in great anxiety were looking everywhere, they were following a trail, and they saw this mass of a bird on the ground, looked like a gigantic demon to them. Ram was compelled to think that this is a big demon who's probably killed and eaten Sita, and he rushed to kill him. And then Jatayu spoke in his dying voice, saying that, I'm Jatayu, I'm a friend of your father's, and I saw Ravan taking Sita away. I tried to fight him, but I lost. And then he passed away. And out of gratitude for his devotee, Ramchandra performed the last rites and blessed Jatayu to go back home, back to Godhead. Such a moving story. We can feel the pathos in it, that although it was a losing proposition, Jatayu gave his last breath to fight the righteous fight. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, do thou fight for the sake of fighting. Don't consider loss or gain, victory or defeat. That's up to Krishna what the result is. Prabhupada used to tell us also about book distribution and preaching and so forth. He said that we can't make people take Krishna consciousness, but we just have to try. That's our duty, to try. Whether we win or lose, that's okay. And as we push on the Sankirtan movement, many obstacles come up. And out of a sense of bhakti, of devotion to Prabhupada, to maintain his movement, to move it forward, we do our duty. We do our duty dutifully out of a sense of bhakti. So, this is the important element that is attractive to Krishna. Nothing else is attractive to Krishna except for this bhakti. And therefore, even Lord Brahma, after testing Krishna to see his powers and realizing that he was infinitely powerful and opulent, he fell at his feet and began to offer prayers. And in those prayers, he said, Jnane prayasa mudapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharidam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shrutigatam tanavan manobir e prayaso jita jito pyasitaistrilokyam. And in this verse he says, give up your intellectual pursuit to understand Krishna. Jnane prayasam udapasya. You may be a great thinker, you may be very intelligent, but Brahma says that some people may say, I know Krishna. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't know anything about Krishna. I can't understand anything about him. And he said that someday the scientists may be able to count all the stars in the sky and all the grains of sand. But still they won't be able to count the unlimited qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he said, Jnane prayasam udapasya namanta eva. Give up your intellectual pursuit to try to understand Krishna and just serve with bhakti. With your body, mind, words. And he said, Stane stita shrutigatam tanavan manobir. Stay in your position, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And submissively hear about Krishna. And by doing that, then you'll come to the perfect stage. Submissive hearing. This is practical. one can submissively hear about Krishna. And by doing that, all good qualities will develop, and pure devotion will develop within the heart. In the story, in the Krishna book, in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto, one day, you want to hear a story? One day, Krishna and Balaram were with their friends in the forest, and Krishna's friends said, Krishna, we're very hungry. We would like something to eat. Actually, they wanted to feed Krishna and Balaram, but on the plea, knowing that Krishna is always trying to serve his servants, they said, we're very hungry, so please, we want something to eat. So Krishna said, nearby, there's some Brahmins getting ready to perform a sacrifice. And there's an opportunity at this particular point of the sacrifice where they can give food in charity, and it won't break the ritual. He said, go to them and ask in my name, but also ask in the name of Balaram, because they won't consider me very high caste for some food. So they went there, and they bowed down to these Brahmins. They were getting ready for the yajna, chanting all kinds of mantras, wearing pukka clothes. They had their perfect Brahmin threads on. And the little boys offered their obeisances, and they said, "O earthly gods, Krishna and Balaram are within the forest, and they're very hungry. Please give us some food." And you know, these Brahmins didn't even acknowledge them. That's the worst thing. When someone doesn't acknowledge you. They didn't say anything. They just ignored them completely. Because they didn't consider Krishna to be important. They didn't know he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Naham prakashya sarvasya yogamaya samavrita mudoyam nabijananti lokamam jamabhyayam. That when people are covered over, they can't understand him, and they just think he's an ordinary person. So that's what these Brahmins thought, which is ironic because they're performing Vedic rituals. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham radisani vishto matak smitir jnanam apohanam cha vedashcha sarver ahameva vedyo vedanta kridveda vedeva chaham. That the purpose of studying the Vedas is to know me. I'm the author of the Vedas. And they had completely missed the point. Out of arrogance. And therefore Krishna had helped to cover over their intelligence. They couldn't understand that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the boys came back disappointed. And they said to Krishna, they didn't even look at us. They didn't give us anything. And Krishna said, that's okay. That's the way of begging. When you beg for something, you have to be ready to be ignored. And then he said, now you go to the wives of the Brahmins. They're cooking for the yajna nearby, and you ask for something from them. And so the boys went in and they offered their obeisances and said, Dear Matajis, Krishna and Balaram are in the forest, they're hungry, and before they could even finish the sentence, the wives of the Brahmins, they dropped whatever else they were doing and they began putting together all the food stuff to bring out to the forest where they heard Krishna and Balaram were hungry. They couldn't bear even for a second. In fact, first they fainted. That's what happened first. When they heard Krishna and Balaram in the forest, that they were actually there, they fainted. And then as they were coming to consciousness, they cursed themselves for fainting. And they said, why did you faint? Because now you missed out on service. This is the mood of devotees. Jaruka, when fanning the Lord, was experiencing ecstatic symptoms. This is mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion. And he was cursing these ecstatic symptoms. Stop, because they were impeding his service. So devotees, they're doing service for service. They don't even want to experience the ecstasy. They don't want anything except service. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye. Mama janmani janmanishvare, bhavatad bhakti rahaiku tuki twai. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives the essence of the mood of the devotee, which is, I don't want wealth, I don't want the association with the opposite sex, I don't want fame. I don't want followers. I don't even care about being a greatly learned scholar. And I don't even care about liberation. Just birth after birth, give me a place where I can serve. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his very humble song, Manasa Deho Geho, he said, my mind, my body, my home, myself, I give to you. He said, none of these things belong to me. My own self doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you. You do whatever you like with it. And he's not even asking for liberation. He said, just all I ask is that I'm reborn. I'll be reborn in the material world, fine. Just even if I'm a bug, please let me be a bug in the house of a devotee. In another prayer, he says, I want to be a dog of the devotee. That's what I'm asking for. I don't want anything else. I just want to be a dog. And I want the Vaishnava. I want to be a dog of a Vaishnav. I want that the Vaishnavas will tie me up just outside their house. And then whenever they're finished eating, they throw me the scraps, and that's what I'll eat. And then if anybody comes to bother them, I'll scare them away. That's what I want. One time I was asking my godbrother, we were in Jagannath Puri, senior godbrother I was staying there with, and I said, so why do you think Prabhupada named him Vaisesika Das? And he goes, what do you care? He named you something. He said, he could have named you Lucky or Sparky. What do you care what he calls you? long as you get named by a Vaishnav, what do you care? That's what Vaishnavism means. It means to put yourself under a Vaishnav. It's a culture of dependency on the Vaishnav, because the Vaishnavas are dear to Krishna. And that's how one actually advances in devotional service. Become the servant, 1,000,000 times removed. This is real liberation, Prabhupada says. So these wives of the Brahmins, when they heard Krishna's name, their hearts were so soft that they immediately fainted on the ground, just hearing about him. And then cursing themselves for fainting and missing 5 seconds of service, they got up and they began to put together the food to take out to Krishna in the forest. They had never seen Krishna before in their life. The reason that they were so soft-hearted and the reason that they were so eager to see Krishna is because they heard about him. Purvarag means they have developed this attraction before they'd even met Krishna by hearing. This is the power of hearing that we just noticed in the prayers of Brahma, where he said, Stane stita shutikatam tanavan. Stay in your position, stay in your situation, whatever it is, doesn't matter if you live in Timbuktu. If you organize your life around hearing about Krishna and associating with devotees, which is exactly what happened with the wives of the Brahmins, because they would go do shopping for all these flowers and other kinds of food stuff that were needed in the yajna, and betel nut. And when they were out buying flowers, bartering for flowers, they would meet the residents of Vrindavan, who would bring flowers from Vrindavan, and they were all pure devotees. And just by associating with them at the market and hearing what they had to say about Krishna, they became enlivened in devotional service. Machita magata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayanta shamam nityam tushanticha ramanticha. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that this is the preoccupation of my devotees. Their lives are dedicated to me. They're always talking about me to others and speaking among themselves about others. And then they become completely satisfied and happy by this. And the wives of the Brahmins then took all the food, they went out to the forests, and there their eyes were finally satisfied by seeing Krishna face to face. He was standing there in a clearing in the forest, and he was holding a lotus flower in his hand, and he was twirling it around in his fingers. And in his heart, he was embracing them. They could feel the embrace, because Krishna is within everyone's heart. He's outside, he's inside. Bahir nishingo, hridaye nishingo, we say all the time. Lord Nrsimha was outside, he's inside, he's everywhere. So this is the experience when one actually has bhakti. One experiences that Krishna is everywhere. There's never any separation from Krishna. And in the intensity of that bhakti, one can feel that Krishna is embracing one within the heart. The wives of the Brahmins were literally communing with Krishna in their heart, and they were drinking him in with their eyes. And then they gave the foodstuff to Krishna and Balaram, and they made prayers to Krishna that now we don't want to go home. We just want to stay in the forest. And we won't even bother you, they said. You don't even have to see us. We just want to be here. Whatever garlands and tulsi leaves that the gopis give you, and that, remnants that you leave behind, that will be our sustenance. And we'll just stay in the background and serve. That's the mood of the devotee. And Krishna said, this won't be proper. You should go home. And they said, we can't go home. We already walked away. And in that culture, a woman just didn't walk out of the house and leave and go into the forest and then come back. But Krishna said, don't worry, I'll arrange everything. So very reluctantly, the wives of the Brahmins went back to their homes. And when they came back, they were greeted and embraced by everybody as being great souls, recognized. And in fact, then the Brahmanas who were performing the sacrifice began to condemn themselves. They said, to hell with all our sacrifices. We learned all these rituals, and we were so puffed up because we thought we knew so many mantras, and that we did everything on time and exactly in the right ritual. But we didn't even recognize Krishna when he came here. We didn't even offer him or his friends anything. So to hell with us, to hell with our rituals. We're nobody. And they began glorifying their wives. And this bhakti is so valuable. Wherever it appears, even in the heart of a demon like Vritrasura, he was a demon. But when he actually entered the battlefield and the warriors were fighting against him, he knocked Indra back 9 yards, which is a very difficult thing to do. Indra's such a great warrior. And then everyone was running away, and he was saying, no, come back and fight. And he was encouraging Indra, who became discouraged because Vritrasura was so powerful. And he said, no, you come and fight me. He wanted to die at the hand of Indra, actually, because Indra had a special weapon that could kill Vritrasura, and he was eager to be liberated in that way, to fulfill his ultimate purpose in life. So wherever bhakti appears, it's auspicious, and wherever it doesn't appear, no matter how many opulences are there, no matter how many beautiful qualities somebody has, it's considered to be useless and dry. And so in our temples, in our community, in our own lives, the main principle is this bhakti. And when we have that, then we have something extremely valuable. It's possible to have an empty bag. In Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, after the devotees moved from the Ultadunga, which was one of the poor places in Calcutta, and when there's a poor place in Calcutta, it's pretty poor. And then somebody donated a big marble temple. And then when the devotees moved from that place in Ultadunga, which had been vibrant with preaching, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta once said that it was hard to even get rice sometimes, that the devotees, they're eating very simply. I mean, imagine not being able to get rice in Bengal. But they were poor, but they were all engaged in preaching very vibrantly. When they moved to this big temple in Bug Bazaar, it was filled with marble and all kinds of opulence, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta noticed that some of the devotees were arguing about who got which room. Territorial. No, that's my room, that's your room. He said, we were better off in Ultadunga. Better off in Ultadunga, because there we had that mood of bhakti, that mood of preaching. Simple thing, but the most beautiful thing. So Narada Muni also says, Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam kutakpanas shashvada bhadramishvade nacharpitam karma yadapya karanam. That even if you're a great jnani and you come to a position above the three modes of material nature, if you don't have bhakti, then it's not beautiful. Nashobate means it doesn't look good. It's unattractive. Nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam. What to speak of, he said, people who are after fruit of activities. That's really ugly. But even self-realization, if it doesn't include bhakti, if it doesn't have a chuta bhav, that feeling of bhakti for chuta, then nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam. It's not beautiful. It doesn't look good. So the only thing that's really beautiful in this world is bhakti, is that simple principle of bhakti. That's what we're after. It's simple bhakti. If we have that, then all our offerings become opulent. Even if they're not sumptuous, they become opulent. And our lives become opulent also. Even if we dress very simply or we live in a simple place, if we have that simple bhakti, then it'll become attractive. And other people become attracted to it as well. When the real thing is there, when there's a spark of real bhakti in the heart of a person, then everyone becomes attracted, because living entities notice this. So many people, when they met Prabhupada, they were affected because of this principle of simple bhakti. And they all felt that Prabhupada was unmotivated. Dogs can sense fear. At least that's what I've heard. And living entities can sense bhakti also. When that real bhakti is in the heart of somebody, then people notice it. There's a kind of a force field of energy that accompanies that person. So our real aim in life is to develop this pure bhakti, and we must winnow out all the other extra things that block that pure bhakti. And that's what Rupa Goswami says, Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karmanyadavritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktirutama. That uttama bhakti, the highest bhakti, means it doesn't depend on anything else. No jnana, no karma. And the definition of faith is Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kahe Surida Nishchoy Krishna Bhakti Koile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. That one is increasing this feeling that all I need is this bhakti. If I just apply myself with sincere feeling in serving Krishna, then everything else will come. There's nothing else necessary. Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur says, Bhaktis tvayis stirataya bhagavan yadisya daivena yat paliti divya kishora murti mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman. That when I perform bhakti, then liberation comes and stands at my door with folded hands saying, how can I serve you? What to speak of all the other things everyone else wants, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Everyone's working hard to get some position in life. But Prabodhananda Saraswati says, if you have this bhakti, simple, pure bhakti, then all of them will be standing outside saying, how can I help you? How can I serve you? So the life of devotion, this is the supreme life. Simple devotion to Krishna with no motivation and no interruption. If you can get that, then you've got everything. And everything else is simply a disturbance to the mind and to the self. So this is practical. Isn't it? Oh, good. It's practical. And this is practical because there's a process to develop pure bhakti, which is given to us in the Shastra, and we should follow that, and we should gradually winnow out all the things that are obstructions to that bhakti, and then we'll become completely happy, and we'll also have the open-mindedness to assist others in attaining the goal of life. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Now we can take some questions or reflections.
All right, so you're talking about this bhakti, and you mentioned a feeling of bhakti, and on when Tuesday night you ended your class saying, so we should chant with love and taste. So this feeling of bhakti and this love and taste, it's not something we could just wish for or demand for. So sometimes it's not there. We're serving, but we don't feel bhakti, and we're chanting, we don't feel love and taste. So how do you just do it? Like you said, chant with love and taste.
Well, if you don't have taste, then you don't have taste, right?
Right.
What can you do? But there's a kind of taste in continuing to chant even though you don't have taste. This is the Vidhi Bhakti. We have Shraddha. This is described by Haridas Thakur in the Harinam Chintamani. He calls Shraddha Namabhas. We have faith that we're developing because of our association with Vaishnavas. Generally people, they first develop faith in Shastra. They develop some relationship with Shastra because they get a Bhagavad Gita or some other book, some other Shastra, and they read it and they think, yes, this is proper direction. This is good. These are sound ideas. They have a sympathy for the Shastra. And then they start to develop faith in the devotees who follow the Shastra. And they say, these people are good because they follow these Shastras. And they begin to associate with those people. And then they start the process of practice themselves, bhajana kriya. And then there's a period of time where there's no taste. Of course, oftentimes, usually, Krishna gives a free sample. Otherwise, people wouldn't be there, because living entities, they need a little taste. Living entities are little tasters. That's what they do. Everyone's looking for a taste. I was on the roof of the building we stayed at in Jagannath Puri about 10 years ago, and I was looking down one day chanting, and I was looking. Everyone's trying to taste something. And I called my friend over and said, look, everyone's tasting something. There were birds, and there were buffalo, and there were cows, and there were people. People were eating something. Birds were flying around looking. Everyone wants to taste. So Krishna sometimes gives a free taste, like he did to Narada Muni when he was just a little boy. He wandered away from home, having some faith in these Vaishnavas. He had a foundation in his devotional life, and when his mother died, he had nobody. Except he had this firm faith in Krishna, that he had met these Vaishnavas. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, before you see the sun rise. In other words, you see the rays of the sun coming up. And he says, before you see Krishna, you see the Vaishnavas. So if you're hanging around with Vaishnavas, you're going to see Krishna pretty soon, because one thing comes after the other. And so Narada Muni wandered off. He was going throughout the creation, just observing the energies of the Lord, and he sat down in a forest and he began to meditate. And then he had this transcendent experience that was beyond his body. And each one of his senses were tasting this bhakti. And he was floating in an ocean of ananda. And then suddenly he came back into his senses, which was excruciatingly painful. And that is that he had lost the taste. He had lost the vision. He now realized, like some people, they have these near-death experiences. I was talking about this the other day. They described afterwards. They see themselves, they see their body, they hear the doctor talking, okay, let's sew him up again. Don't know if he's going to make it. They remember all these things, even though and then they come back in the body, and it's like a gross experience after being a little subtle. But Narada Muni was actually situated in a completely transcendental position, came back in his body, and then he was struggling to try to get that feeling back again, to try to transcend. And then Krishna spoke to him in an unembodied voice and said, you're not perfect yet. You're not going to get this again in your lifetime. You got to work for it now. That was a free sample. And so devotees usually get a free sample. Most people come and they say, I had an experience. Somehow or other, they got some kind of taste. And then we work without taste for some time with faith. And this is mentioned in Harinam Chintamani, as I said. It's called Shraddha Namabhas. Shraddha Namabhas. You have faith in it. You have abiding faith. And you're chanting, and you may not have full faith. But Thakur Haridas says, if you're chanting in that state with that kind of attitude, you'll come to the perfectional stage. And when one goes on with one's devotional duties, even out of faith, even before one has much taste, as I said, there's a taste in that. That regardless of, as Krishna says, or Lord Chaitanya says, last verse, Ashlishyava pararatam pinashnu mama darshanam marmahatam korotuva. He says, a darshanam, if you don't show yourself to me, it's okay, I'll still go on serving you. In that attitude, that no matter what you do to me, Krishna, even if I don't have a taste, I'm still going to go on serving you. Suddenly you have taste. From that stoic attitude that I'm serving Krishna, whatever happens, I'm going to do this. I'm never going to stop the chanting of Hare Krishna. If it kills me. When we were at Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj's Bhajan Kutir, we were talking about his life and teachings, and one of them was about steadiness. He said that at all costs be steady in your devotional service, even at the cost of your own life. That's an attitude where there's taste. You say, I'm going to remain steady in devotional service even at the cost of my own life. Suddenly this taste will surge into your heart and you'll be able to feel it. So along the way, there's all different kinds of tastes. It may not be the highest taste yet, but it's enough taste that we're steady in devotional service and that we continue on.
You mentioned the duties of devotional service, and we all have duties sort of in the material. You mentioned duties of devotional service, but we all have duties in the material world. And sometimes the mind is thinking, well, if I were to give up my material duties, then perhaps I could, take up devotional duties more and become pure. And so, one thinks that maybe I should just abandon, these other duties that I have. And how does one properly make the decision as to, what duties to accept and what duties to, give up?
Well,
and at what point in their lives and things like that.
Interestingly, when Krishna told the wives of the Brahmins to go back, he said, go back and do your duties and think of me at the same time. And it's the same thing that Krishna told Arjuna. He said, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudyacha vayarpita mano buddhir mami vaishakya samshayaha. That first he told him that you have to, whatever you remember at the time of death, you'll attain. And if you think of me, you'll attain me. And then he said, therefore, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, at all times and all places, mamanusmara yudyacha, always remember me, but go and fight at the same time. He didn't say, you can't fight and remember me at the same time. He said, fight and remember me. And so Prabhupada comments in that purport that if you go on chanting Hare Krishna and you go on with your work, then you'll be able to remember Krishna. And, fight the fight that you have to do. You can't capriciously give up your duties. It's not so easy. You can't do it. And Arjuna thought of, going off into the forest and becoming a sannyasi or something like that. And Krishna said that you'll still come back to your nature. Krishna does tell Uddhava in the Bhagavatam, in his teachings to Uddhava, that Tavat karma kurvita nanirvidyeta yavata matkacha shavanadova shadayava najayate. That until that time, he said, until you've attained a perfect taste for hearing and chanting, that is insatiable taste for hearing and chanting, that you can't think of anything else or doing anything else. Continue on, you have to continue on with your duties. Tavat karma until that time. Tavat karma kurvita na nirvidyeta yavata. You can't give them up until you have this other taste. And Krishna makes natural arrangements for us. So this is also parallel with what Brahma said. Stane stita shutigatam tanuvan manobir. Stay in your position. And at the same time, hear about me. And then let Krishna make these arrangements. And how do we tell? We have to always keep ourselves ready. Louis Pasteur said that great discoveries come only unto the prepared mind. So we have that book, Satsvarup Das Goswami Maharaj wrote called that one chapter, A Lifetime in Preparation. And we should always be thinking like that. Whatever I'm doing now, I'm preparing myself for the opportunity, like the wives of the Brahmins got. So one day, the coward boys are going to come in and say, hey, you want to go? Hey, you better be ready. Hey, you want to come? I'm a little busy. That was the Brahmins. They were doing all their work, but they were out of it. But the wives of the Brahmins, they were doing their work, but they were cultivating Krishna consciousness at the same time, so they were ready. We can't ourselves just run off, and we can't also jump up and grab Krishna with our intelligence or any other way, but we can make ourselves ready so that Krishna will come and get us. So when he does come and say, let's go, you go, all right, I'm going, I'm ready, I've been waiting for you. Nirkula.
It's kind of along those lines. When we were in New Vrindavan, Madhanija from Denver, who has been doing book distribution for close to 40 years, every single day since she joined the movement. She said that she never met Srila Prabhupada. She's our god sister, but she never met Srila Prabhupada. And she was a teacher before she came to the movement. And, she was wanting to be more involved full-time in devotional service. And she said Srila Prabhupada came to her in dream and told her exactly how to do it, exactly how to give up, her teaching job and move into the temple, and she just followed those instructions, and here she is all these years later, still holding on to his lotus feet, steady in her service.
She's married too. Yeah.
She's what?
She was married at the time. Yeah.
She was married at the time. That makes it even better.
And she just saw mountains, so she went to Denver. She'd never been to the temple. And,
She saw mountains, so she went to Denver.
Yeah.
Mile High City.
I never went.
Tesham satata yuktanam. Yes, Mangalarti.
Prabhu, I have a different question, but related to the class. The two questions intertwine. You mentioned about Lord Brahma in his prayer in the Krishna book. That's probably the only portion in the Krishna book, besides Indra's portion, that seems like is awe and reverence, like worshipping Krishna as if it is Supreme Personality of Godhead. I mean, he is, but in Krishna book he's doing that. And then we come in Lord Brahman's parampara. At the same time, we see Lord Chaitanya in the same parampara, where the mood is not at all awe and reverence, and it's a different kind of a mood. So my question is that in ISKCON, where is the? I mean, what's the mood? What's the destination of those who come to I am ISKCON? Like, is it this awe and reverence kind of a mood that Lord Brahma has, or is it Lord Chaitanya? Like, what's our? Like you said, be prepared, get ready. What's the destination? Where are we going? Where's the spiritual? ISKCON, the spiritual edition Prabhupada talked about it. Like, what's our destination?
Well, first of all, the prayers that Brahma offered to Krishna, there's a lot of ras. They're very rasika, actually. If you look at them carefully, you'll see that, he's describing the beauty of Krishna and his body and the clothes he's wearing and everything like that. And then he also talks about Krishna playing with his friends in Vrindavan and how they're the most fortunate, living entities in the world and so forth. So that it's not exactly, an on-reverence. He's recognized that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's also amazed at how he's playing this role as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. And it's an important chapter, and they're important prayers because it validates the Gaudiya Sampradaya that is based really on one verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And we're saying Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So many other Sri Vaishnavas, and if you go to South India, they'll say, yeah, Krishna's nice. Those are some of the, incidental pastimes of Lord Narayan that every once in a while he does. They consider them not so important. And the Vaikunthawalas, they think of, Krishna's childhood pastimes as not very important. Whereas when we sing the Damodar Ashtaka, we say, this is everything. These are the sweetest things. And our acharyas are saying, this verse in the Bhagavatam says this is the foundational point. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Brahma, the originator of the first disciple under Krishna, who's passing down this mood, is also saying the same thing. He's realizing that Krishna, the cowherd boy, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is some Aishvarya there. There is some reverence, but that's the relationship that Brahma has. But he's also revealing that this cowherd boy who took the breast milk of every resident of Vrindavan out of this feeling of love for them. I mean, there couldn't be any more intimate in the Vatsalya Ras. He became the other cowherd boys just to fulfill the desires of the residents of Vrindavan, to go there and sit on the lap of the mothers and drink their milk, to satisfy this maternal instinct that they had towards Krishna. So he's describing all this. So they're very rasik, those prayers. Both things are there. And he also talks about how the boys are playing and so forth in those prayers in that section. And we're following in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, but he comes in as Acharya Leela. He's coming as a devotee of Krishna, but he's Krishna himself. He's Radha and Krishna combined. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahiyanya. And he has his internal and external purposes. The time for Krishna's appearance in the world coincided with Krishna's desire to come and give out something that he hadn't given for a long time. Anarpita charim chirat karuna yavatirna kalao samarpayitum tojwala rasam bhakti shriyam. He's giving out. He feels that I haven't given this highest thing, that people have only been getting this Vaikuntha message, but they don't know about this kind of devotion that's so far beyond on reverence. There's a special place for it that nobody knows. Even the residents of Vaikuntha don't know about it. It's beyond. It's this private island, the Shweta Dweep, the Goloka Vrindavan. Goloka namni nijadamni taleta tasya devi mahesha hridam suteshu teshu. Brahma reveals it when he hears Krishna's flute song and he begins singing. He says, there's a topmost planet. That's Goloka Vrindavan. And Uttara, she intuited that was there. She said, there's a kind of devotion that some devotees have that's so rarefied. It's so far beyond this mood of on-reverence that there must be a place where the devotees live and worship Krishna in that mood. And so she was asking, where is it? I want to hear about that place. Where's that place? And that's what the Brihad Bhagavatamrita is about. The search for that place where there's pure devotion, where devotees don't even know that Krishna is God. And that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. Anarpita charim chirit karunari avatirna kalau samarpayutam utto jwala rasam subhakti shriyam, this highest ras. And he said, he described how Krishna is not pleased so much with the reverent prayers of the Vedas. Sahasra Shesha Purushaha Sahasrakta Sahasrabat Sabhuming Vishwato Vitvarattatishtatta Shangulam Purusha Evera Gung Sarvam Yat Bhutam Yachtabhavyam. There's all these, Vaikuntha prayers. He is like, meh. But when his girlfriends come and say, hey, we're not talking to you today, then he gets, he feels some, like this is taste, this is the real ras. And so that's what Kaviraj Goswami is describing. This is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to reveal to the world. That's why it's such an unusual thing. Nobody's heard about this. Nobody knows about this kind of devotion. And that's who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. He came as Krishna, coming to taste that ras himself, because he can't fully taste it as himself. He's got to become his devotee and act like a devotee to taste it. And that's what he wants. So at the same time that he's giving it out, that he's tasting it, because he's, when somebody's, eating a big feast, there's plenty left over for everybody else. That's the idea. Everybody else gets some. Or as one of the acharyas says, that he's so intoxicated, it's like an emperor. He gets so intoxicated one day that he goes into the treasury where all the most valuable jewels of the kingdom are kept, all the heirlooms, and he starts putting them in a bag. And then he goes down to the street, the common road, and he's singing and dancing in intoxication, and he just gives them out. The cars are stopping, knocking on the window. Here, take this. And, just passing them out to everybody wherever he goes. Magi va na magi, keha patra va apatra. He doesn't consider who's fit, who's unfit, who asked for it, who didn't ask for it. He just gives it out to everybody. And that's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's experiencing this highest ras of Goloka Vrindavan. And now because he's here, it's spilling over. Everybody's getting it. And the Goswamis, they're the ones, they took that, it's coming down in torrents actually. The kind of prema that he's distributing, it's so heavy, that's coming down so heavily, practically, no one could even understand it. In fact, Kaviraj Goswami says the kind of symptoms, ecstatic symptoms, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed in his body, oozing blood from his pores and stuff like this. This Vrindavan Thakur says in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, nobody's heard of this stuff before. You don't hear about this in Vaikuntha. His limbs come in his body like a pumpkin. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says, some people, they can't understand this, but I understand what this is. And he says, and I completely believe in these symptoms. And it's not even told in the Vedas, these kinds of things. Shutam apyo panishadam. The Vedas, Dure Harikatam Ritat. The Vedas and the Upanishads and all these teachings, they're far, far away. Dure Harikatam Ritat, from this Harikata, this Amrita that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is distributing. So, what we get in ISKCON, what everybody else gets in Kali Yuga who comes in contact with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is this opportunity to go back to Goloka Vrindavan. That's why Rupa Goswami says, Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaur Tvishenam. They can't believe it. They know what it is. They've studied it. They know what it is, and they say, he's given it away free. He's given it to people on the street corner who don't have any qualification, nothing. And he's just, here, take it. It's the highest thing. And they say, this is amazing. Study it, they say. Kaviraj Goswami says, study it yourself. See what's going on here. The great giveaway of the universe. It's never been done before. So the Goswamis took those torrents of prema coming from Mahaprabhu and Nana Shastra Vichara Naika Nipano Shadharma Samstapako. They codified it. They put it into a form that everyone could read about and follow it. And that's what we come to. Is you say, okay, how do you get it? Follow the Goswamis. We're Rupanugas. We follow the Goswamis just as Prabhupada taught us to. And if you do that, this following is so powerful that you take the instruction that comes down through our founder Acharya and you say, okay, I'll apply it in my life in the best way I can. And if you serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet in this mood of dasya ras, you don't have to be a big premi. You don't have to understand all these things. You just have to serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. And if you do that by pushing on the Sankirtan movement, sitting on the phone all day, you walk by and see Keshava, it's like, yeah, I need that island. I want 20 buses down here. And, you know, he's working out on the phone. That's Dasya Ras, to the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by that, the sweat of your brow, serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and going on with the processes of hearing and chanting, then you get Radha Krishna Prem in your heart. Gora Kripa Holehe, Esha Vrindavan Radhe Sham Pabe Darshan. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. When you get the mercy of Lord Gaur, then you can see Vrindavan. Then you can actually see that. So we're all eligible for that. Why? Jiva Goswami says in his Bhakti Sandarbha, the reason we're all eligible for that kind of mercy is because we're so fallen. That's your eligibility. Yahoo! You're the most fallen, therefore you're eligible for this highest mercy. What a deal. That's why, you know, devotees who realize this, they say, give it out, don't hold it back. It's violence to hold this back. To not give this out, that's violence. To hold back the preaching, say, don't do it, let's do something else. Violence. So the Sankirtan movement means give it to everybody. Let people have this, let them drink it, let them go back home, back to God. Go Premanande Om Tat Sat. All right, last question, really quick.
To that verse that you had quoted, Mukti Mukulit Anjali, that verse, the acharyas have all these, they're all goddesses of fortune, Mukti and all the different goddesses of fortune waiting to serve them. But because they are so engaged in themselves serving Krishna, they have no time. How does, and we know that the principle is to engage everyone and everything in the service of Krishna. So how do these pure devotees who have no time for anything else to receive service from Mukti Devi, or how do they engage all these blessings in the service of Krishna?
Well, the idea is that they don't need any of these benedictions. In the discussion between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Vyankata Bhatta in South India, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes, or maybe it was a discussion between Srivas Pandit and Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy is a Vrindavan man. Srivas Pandit is a Vaikuntha man. He's Narada Muni. So they were talking about the differences between these two realms. And Ramananda Roy is describing how there are desire trees in Vrindavan. Means you can get anything you want, but nobody wants anything. The idea is that this bhakti is the only thing you want. Once you have that, the whole world it's insignificant. Anything else is insignificant. That's why all these goddesses of fortune are standing there. Can I do something for you? I said, maybe someday, but not right now. Thanks. One becomes preoccupied with this bhakti. So that's the idea behind it. It's everything else is available to the devotee if you just get this one thing, bhakti. So that's our ideal.
But then how do they serve Krishna?
Who serve Krishna?
Mukti Devi and all the other goddesses of fortune. How do they serve Krishna if they cannot serve the devotees?
Well, in some ways, like Mukti is there to serve Krishna by getting rid of all the Mayavadis. Like, give them an alternative. So that they don't invade the space of the devotees. That's something that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, mentions something along those lines in his commentary in the 6th canto about the pastimes of the Jambil. Everyone has their living entities they have their free will, independent desire, and Krishna doesn't interfere with that. So he gives everyone an opportunity. And so these other paths, Gyan, Karma, and the siddhis and all these kinds of things, Krishna makes them available. So he fulfills the desires of others. In fact, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, sometimes devotees don't get complete taste from chanting Hare Krishna, but they just are taken back to Godhead after they leave their body. Because Krishna doesn't want to bewilder the minds of the jnanis and the karmis by showing that the bhakti path is so powerful that just by chanting you get everything. So he hides it. And he makes the devotees work a little bit. And so the jnanis think, that's nothing. And then they can stay on their path. Why? Because that's what they want. So Krishna perfectly fulfills their desire. So they serve somehow in that way. Everyone's got some kind of seva. Okay, Hare Krishna. Pancha Kopadrubascha Krupasnabhevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Bhakti Bombers Ki Jai, Team Toronto Ki Jai, Go Premanande Haribo.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.